ladies and gentlemen, Alex Effer, founder of Resilient Training and Rehab. So we met when I took your biomechanics course, and I have to say, to this day, it has been one of the most valuable and impactful mentorships that I've ever taken for my professional career as a physical therapist, and it enabled me to really help bridge the gap between the rehab side and the exercise side, in which we can help our clients feel better, increase their range of motion, while also giving them a workout at the same time, which I think really helps separate us apart, our practice apart from everyone else's. So, but I don't know much about you personally, besides you have this awesome mentorship and you're from Toronto, or is it even Toronto, somewhere in Canada?
Yeah, it is. It is just outside Toronto. I grew up, born and raised in Toronto. But yeah, no, I really appreciate, first of all, you having me on, for inviting me to Boston, well, Needham in particular, to do the workshop. And yeah, I mean, I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing hockey more specifically, but my parents put me in every single sport just because they thought that it was beneficial just to get us moving. I've got siblings, and so we were all just moving all the time, playing sports. And back in the day, there wasn't a lot of TV or anything like that. So it was, although it sounds like I'm aging myself, it sounds like I'm old, but it's not really that old. But at the same time, it's like there wasn't all this Netflix and everything. And so for me, it was very much like we got creative in playing outside and doing, playing manhunt and hockey and all these different things. But I really, I had a huge passion for hockey and sports and strength conditioning. And both my parents are accountants, or were accountants. And that's not something that I wanted to do. I just saw them going in 9 to 5, working behind a desk. And it's just not something that I was interested in doing. I wanted to move. I wanted to be involved. Initially, I would be involved in the NHL. Like, I actually wanted to work in the NHL, get my name on the cup. That's what I really wanted. And then, I went through school, wanted to be a physical therapist, took some internships. The internships that I took were probably not the best ones, unfortunately, and that kind of deterred me a little bit. So then I decided to become an exercise physiologist, which in Canada, there's more leeway. I can work with pain and rehabilitation in hospitals and all these different things. And I'm also able to work with athletes. So it kind of gave me both options, which was great. But then I started understanding the body and working in different environments. I'm like, you know what? Like, physical therapy was not what I thought it was. Like, I thought it was like from a negative standpoint, because I remember this one situation where I was working or interning in the physical therapy clinic, and I had this professional baseball player and I had a 90-year-old man. Both had the same kind of rotator cuff surgery and both given the same protocol, despite the fact that they're totally different contexts, right? And so for me, I'm just like, this is so boring, given banded external rotations. But back then, obviously, I didn't know anything about movement. I was there to learn, but I'm just like, this is what it is, just ultrasound and banded external rotations. And it's like, that's not for me. It's too boring. That feels like a 9 to 5 job again, right? It doesn't feel very dynamic and complex. But of course, now understanding the body, and working for a long enough period of time, I totally understand the fun of that profession. So I'm not sitting here saying that, physical therapy sucks or anything like that, because like, I love it. Like, but what you then tend to realize is that despite the fact that there are certain things you can and cannot do, what am I trying to say? Like, the title that you have doesn't mean that you can't learn things. And so you're not restricted to your title. As a personal trainer, as a physiotherapist, like a personal trainer, they can understand how the body moves. A physiotherapist, they can understand how to train, right? I feel like if you just put yourself in one box, you're going to limit yourself. Because I remember coming up, it was very much like physical therapists, they understood movement. The trainers, they understood how to get people fit. But there was never like a merging of the two, right? Until later. I think it's getting much better now. I still think that there's still some ways to go. But for me, that's kind of really where I saw myself, as kind of right in that middle, where I wanted to work in the rehabilitation center or setting, but I also wanted to work in the strength conditioning setting. And so, how can I merge those two together where it's not like rehabilitation is just doing this low level stuff on the ground, but it could be training, or it should be training to some degree, just a different spectrum of intensity, right? You have a professional hockey player come in and you have a Gen Pop. Both need different ends of the spectrum in terms of power, strength, capacity, but they both need it, right? And so to understand how to improve their goals, whether it's pain, movement, or strength conditioning, understanding both of them and then understanding their idiosyncratic structures and the tissues that we need to load in a certain way, like that's where it became fun for me. And so, yeah, now what I do is I kind of insert myself in the middle. Like I work with in rehabilitation, but I also work with strength conditioning. And for the past 5 years now, I've educated people from all over the world on a different model to view the body and view movement and program exercise and select exercise and assess, and how to use assessment to program exercises. So I guess that's kind of like a long-winded answer.
Hmm. No, I love it. And I think I share the same sort of disappointment going into the physical therapy realm, even as when I was an intern. I guess we saw the same thing. It's no different from the States versus in Canada. It's
Mhm.
doing low level band exercises with ultrasounds and e-stim machines. And it was very boring. It was very much I go in and I'm like, you don't need me here, right?
Yeah.
You could just, right? Anyone could really be doing this.
Yeah.
So what really happened is that when you go to physical therapy school, you really is trained to not hurt people. You're
Mhm.
really there to make sure that people are safe. But when
Mhm.
it comes to actually getting people better, I
Mhm.
think there is a huge gap in
Mhm.
this space. I
Mhm.
think traditionally the whole profession really built on helping people with more acute injuries. So if you,
Mhm.
if you came out of surgery, yes, the protocol will look very similar. You have to get
Mhm.
some range of motion to a certain degree. The swelling has to come down. You slowly got to weight bear. But when it comes to people who's dealing with things a little bit more tricky or things a bit more chronic, it
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense to apply that more acute protocol to something that is a
Mhm.
little bit more chronic, right? And of course,
Mhm.
not even taking into consideration just the level of capacity that each person has. So
Mhm.
I think where you really shine is that you're able to take an assessment process, someone who's an average Joe who just wants to go to the gym once a week or twice a week or something versus a professional athlete. That
Mhm.
assessment tool can work for both. And
Mhm.
pick exercise selections based on these assessments. And
Mhm.
what I found fascinating was when I was able to take the tools that you taught me, like for example, if someone's back was hurting, instead of going down and doing a massage on their back or doing some clamshells like we've been taught in school,
Yeah.
we did like a hinge with one leg in front of the other.
Mhm.
But just be really purposeful about how we coach that move to make sure that we're getting the right adaptations. And guess
Mhm.
what? They come out and they said, my back feels so much better.
Mhm. Mhm.
But and it stayed. That's the best part. It stayed
Mhm.
because we're
Yeah,
loading those structures.
exactly.
And that's kind of the fun part about physical therapy for me is that we can use all these different type of tools. But I think
Mhm.
getting a little more into exercises, exercise in a more I get more pinpoint, we're more accurate with the way that we're
Sniper,
describing.
like a snipe.
Exactly, like a
Yeah.
sniper. So know
Yeah.
exactly what we need to get out of this person and
Yeah.
finding the right exercise to fit their program.
Yeah, and I
So,
think the cool thing, like, about, you know, the more that, like, I found myself in the past 4 months, usually what I do when I try to learn something, or, um, kind of just go deeper into my knowledge, is every 4 months, I like to write out kind of what I know, and in, like, some type of spider graph. And then, something for me, for example, that I found that, not, I wouldn't say limited is the wrong word, but something that I could be better at was understanding plyometrics, understanding how to manipulate force and the physics of force, and how individual structures of people, like somebody who has broad shoulders or narrow waist or wide pelvis, narrow shoulders, how, and then just looking at the shape of their knees and shape of their feet, how those people are able to manage those forces, not just externally, but more specifically internally. And then what's cool about that is that you can start to understand how to apply force to somebody and program exercises based on that. And it doesn't have to be plyometrics. It could be something like you're laying on your side, pushing your foot into the wall. Like that's a kind of force that would still be applicable to something like force production, right? Versus something that's more like accepting force. And so I found myself going down this rabbit hole of understanding more of this type of like movement or like plyometrics, for example. But I remember reading all those books a long time ago, but I just read it for face value and be like, this is the protocol. This is what you have to do. Exactly what you said about like the acute rehab clients. It's like, this is the protocol you follow this. This is how you program it. And again, there's not a lot of thinking involved. It's not fun. I was just felt like when I read it the first time, I was just memorizing. I'm like, people told me to read Verkhoshansky, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read Triphasic because that's what people told me was good. But I didn't understand it at, I just, like I said, I understood it at face value. But now that I understand movement and how you can divide movement into different phases, whether that's gait, whether that's running, however you want to divide it, whether that's breathing, compression, decompression, all these different things, you can start to now pick exercises at different ends of that force velocity curve. And force velocity sounds like a strength conditioning term, but it's physics. It applies to every single environment. But like thinking about it in a different way than just like this movement is faster, this movement is slower. Not about that. It's like, it's more about how we can change or program exercises based on people's structures, understanding how to manipulate all these physical concepts, these physics-based concepts to then apply to somebody. And so like that's something that I'm really excited to, present in Boston, is just this different perspective on program design. In my mentorship and in my foundations course, I talk a lot about the principles and I do cover program design and programming. But of course, online, there's only so much I can get involved or go in depth in those things because I'm not in the room to go through movements with people, get people to try to do it because maybe they don't have the space. Maybe they're watching a recording, right? Because they can't make the live call. So it's like all these different constraints. But now we're presenting in person. Like I want to introduce concepts that I haven't presented anywhere else. I want to introduce assessment concepts, again, that I haven't presented, programming concepts, exercise selection, and then teaching people how to not just, again, copy the exercise that we're going to go over, but understand the principles. So it's like you have different categories. You can make up your own exercise based on the person in front of you. And that's been a really cool thing that I've seen, as you mentioned, with like through the years I've been running the mentorship, is there's people who are posting the concepts that they learned in the mentorship, but just totally creating a new exercise. And to me, that's so cool. Like using ramps, using wedges, using bands, positions of arms, how you're like if you're facing towards or away from the cable or beside the cable, all these different things. And to me, that's the coolest thing is if you really understand these concepts, you can create exercises. Or you are using exercises that, so I actually had this person, he's a track coach, and he used this position that I posted yesterday. It's like some oblique sit or something like that. And he's like, hey, like I used this 20 years ago. All these track guys were using this 20 years ago, but I didn't understand it at this level. Like I just thought that it was stretching something. But now I understand at a different level. So it's not just creating new exercises, but taking exercises that you may have used and have a totally different appreciation for it and how you can use it in different environments. Like a pigeon, that's amazing. It's not just opening up, it's not just stretching tissues. but you can improve tibial internal rotation, your ability to flex your ankle, pronate your foot, right? So you can just use these different exercises that we're so used to using constraints, and then just totally changing the intent behind it, which is that's how you get better results instead of just throwing a bunch of exercises to improve hip mobility and hoping one of them sticks, you know?
And I think having that ability to have that knowledge is just going to build so much more confidence in the clinician and the trainer,
Mhm.
because throwing something out there and seeing if it works, even if it does work, you don't understand why it works, it's still very stressful
Oh,
because
yeah.
you don't know how to progress this person the next time you see them. You just hope you get lucky again. And that's
Mhm.
really no way to really practice. And once you understand, I think that's where the beauty really comes in, where the art and the science really start to get married.
Mhm.
Because I love creativity, because I think, the whole reason I started my entire practice is all for to have some kind of creative outlet to decide what I want to do. And I
Mhm.
think physical therapy had really helped satisfy that once I understood biomechanics and how it works.
Mhm.
Like, I love the example you just gave about the pigeon and how that will work on the hip, but also give you some tip internal rotation to work on the pronation.
Mhm.
One of the things that we love looking at is the coupled motions of the body, in which
Mhm.
if the foot pronates, what does this shin do? And when the shin
Mhm.
does this, what does the femur do? And what does the pelvis do? And how does everything have to translate based on just one movement here? And once you can understand that and map that out, now you can be like, okay, I need to get more pronation back, but maybe do I need to look at the shoulder, and what does the shoulder need to do to create pronation at the foot?
Exactly.
And then now it's all right, what kind of exercise should I use based on these principles that I know that can create that effect? And you go back to the drawing board and then you think, and then you come back, you create this thing, and then okay, it's a little too complicated. This person, it might not work for this person. Let's make it simple. And you present it, you do it, and then voila, you see that improvement. And after that, your mind is blown, their mind is blown, and you just feel excited now.
Yeah, you
Each
just
session.
create an exercise that doesn't look like anything that people see, but you're just like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Like I used to like look at, when I was young and naive, I'm not saying that I'm old, but like a long time ago, let's say
Yeah.
10 years ago, I used to like look at people in the gym and be like, what are they doing? It's so weird. But now I'm that guy. I'm just like, okay, you're gonna hold, you're gonna hold a Zercher band position, your left arm with your right foot, front foot elevated, with your big toe elevated, and your right hand holding a suitcase. It's like you're creating this type of contraption that basically, when you understand the idea of like the body self-organizing itself, you're just constraining that person so much that they've got no choice but to adapt the way that you want them to. And then when you think of that, you're just like, well, that makes a lot of sense. When I'm explaining to this client, something about the knee and they don't know where their quad is, how can I expect them to get into a position and make the changes that we need to get, but they don't understand anything about the body. They don't understand where they are in space. You ask them, hey, where do you feel the pressure of your feet? They have to look down at their feet because they have no connection. So how can we give them an exercise and assume their body can just organize itself? And like that's where you start talking about constraints and like, I'm gonna prop up this big toe, I'm gonna put a band around the knee, I'm gonna do all these different things. So all they have to do is just go up and down, right? They don't have to think about where to put pressure. I'm putting them in a place, like I'm molding them in place so that they have no choice but to elicit the response that we're looking for. And so
Yeah.
that's where it gets even more fun, right?
Yeah. How do I give this body no choice but to use these set of muscles that I know it needs to move this set of joints into the place that I want?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's actually it. So the
That's
way I love to describe it is, if I need to make your bicep work, all I need to do is have you hold on to a weight like this,
it. Mhm.
and it'll work. There's
Yeah.
no way. If it doesn't work, your arm will fall off,
Yeah.
and your body's not gonna let that happen. So it'll do what we want it to do.
Yeah, and then you get them to hold dumbbell in a certain way, you start to improve movement because, as you said, the rib cage has to organize itself, the scapula has to organize itself, the the humerus, the wrist bones, like everything has to organize itself to hold that position. Otherwise, you're going to fall over. Right. And so now you're like, okay, I can hold the weight at this angle of shoulder flexion, at this angle of abduction or adduction, and I'm going to force the response that this person needs. Right. And then I can start to restore motion. And then again, like it then goes down to when you're looking at range of motion from an assessment standpoint, it's not just looking at bones and muscles. It's understanding, you know, what the position is, what the shape is, how are they pressurizing their pelvis, or can they pressurize their pelvis? Can they hinge? Can they squat? That has to do with what's happening inside more than it does what's happening on the outside,
Mm,
right?
I love that. And one of the things that I learned from you for neck mobility, which has been amazing, is that working the biceps and doing bicep curls had an amazing effect on people's ability to free up their neck.
Yeah,
And that's so much better than just telling someone to do very faint neck exercises. Like I can
exactly.
go ahead and do some curls like this and
Yeah,
breathe in a certain manner, and then I can free up my neck.
yeah.
I think
And
people
it's,
should know about
yeah,
these type of techniques.
but it's also easy buy-in. Everyone wants to train arms. You're just like,
Exactly.
hey, this is how you train arms in a smart way.
Yeah.
It's not taking this away,
And
right?
loosening up your neck.
Exactly. You can improve range of motion, reduce tension or pain, and you're training biceps or triceps.
Right.
Count everybody in because most people want to do that. Like I used to work with a few of these clients, and they would be like, and this was again before I kind of knew anything, like when I first started, and I would give them these routines, and they'd be like, "Where's the bicep and tricep?" And the thing was, is when you actually like go back to like old strength conditioning, they didn't give bicep and tricep because they're like, and I used to like work with a lot of hockey players, and it was like biceps don't score goals. That's what the big thing was. And then now it's like you realize, you know what? That was a very myopic viewpoint of what it actually does. They're just looking at it from an aesthetic standpoint where it's actually very functional. Like triceps are very functional when it comes to the shape or the rotation of the rib cage or shoulder mobility, or as you said, neck mobility, even hip mobility, right? It can really target all those things as long as you position it properly or you get the right pressure points of the foot or the position of all these different joints. But yeah, that's where it becomes again more fun, where you can use these things that you're going to get more buy-in from somebody who comes in and trains. Like, hey man, my neck is killing me from, I'm doing these overhead presses or whatever. It's like, here's a bicep curl. They're definitely going to do that. They're not going to do neck stretches all the time, even though it feels good, but it doesn't have the same effect or, yeah, the long lasting adaptation that we're looking for. So, again, you start getting really, really creative with traditional bodybuilding exercises and people buy in.
Yeah. And not just long term, but you see these effects short term. And I
Short
think
term.
that's
Yeah.
powerful because I
Mm-hmm.
think, people go into physical therapy, they go into training and, oh, yeah, I won't see anything until like a month. I was like, well, if it's the right thing for your
Mm-hmm.
body, we should see a positive improvement before and after within the same time frame that we're here. So
Yes.
sometimes these improvement within 5 minutes. Like if
Yeah.
you're restricted to one side and you do this component and you breathe in that way, we should start to see that movement free up. And
100%.
that's, yeah, and I think that's what I think a lot of therapists needs is
Mm-hmm.
to be able to show that before and after, not just for the patients, but for themselves, that they
Mm-hmm.
know they're on the right track, that
Yeah.
they're biting on the right tree,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's a key thing is the confidence. And you've mentioned it a couple times. Like I think having the confidence of, selecting the right exercise, or, we talked about like somebody comes in, like you're not overwhelmed at the case that's in front of you because you understand movement well enough, you understand assessment well enough that you can tease out the things that these people need. And like it could be that everything is limited. But like the way that I do things is like I look at their posture, look at how they walk, I look at how they move different movements, and I look at, table tests, stuff like that. And then I determine based on the shape of this person, the position they're standing, position they're moving, these are the two main assessment measurements. And they're usually the worst ones, right? They're usually the most limited. These are the ones that I'm going after. And every exercise I provide is test and retest. Did it get better? If it didn't, even if it's like 5 degrees, if it didn't get better, it's the wrong exercise. Let's try a new one. Let's try a new one. And I feel like from the confidence aspect, a lot of people, when they do an exercise and then a client says, I don't really notice that much of a difference, they get, it's not a shot. I wouldn't say shot to an ego, but they get like upset or overwhelmed or stressed because they didn't hit the first exercise right away. Right. It's not, it's, like it, and there's the confidence aspects. Like, no, don't worry. That exercise didn't work, but the principle's sound. I'm just going to try something different. I may need more constraints. That position was too hard for them. I need to, not regress the movement. I don't like the word regression because it implies that it's an easier movement. It's more so, I'm going to give you more appropriate movement. Like maybe laying on your back wasn't appropriate, but laying on your side is going to be appropriate just based on what we're trying to achieve, the shape, unweighting you more. And so I really think that when you understand these concepts, you become so much more confident. And as you said, the results stick. They happen really quickly. Now, whether, there's some people who are like, oh, I came in here and I squat 60 degrees. I want to leave squatting 150 degrees. It's like, well, we do have to manage expectations as well. But we could be like, hey, I got you from 60 to 90, and 90 is a great position. Let's start training there. And then we will continue. We're going to program all your exercises based on trying to hit that 90. Then the next phase is all about let's get a little bit lower. But you should see improvements with every movement provided, or before they get in and as they leave. There should be changes. And if there isn't, then it's like, because I don't believe in the, hey, you will get changes if you come see me 3 times a week for the next 3 months. It's like, what? It's like, I should see these changes today so I know that we can build them.
Absolutely. And we hound on this for our clients. We say, hey, if we're on the right track, we should see an immediate change within the first session that you see us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, we might need more time to figure things out, or we need to refer to someone else who may be more appropriate. And, in the whole grand scheme of themes, when it comes to assessment, reassessment, for physical therapy, for even training, we're just at the highest level. We're all just it's just a guessing game.
It is.
But it's just how well can you play this guessing game?
Yeah, it's an educated guess, though. You're educating yourself. Like it's all a game of probability, right? It's like you have somebody who comes in the industry day one, they're going to have a relatively low probability of success compared to somebody who's been in the industry for 10 years and is really focused on mastering their craft, right? Really focused on honing in their skills, understanding the body. Like the more we know, the higher probability of success. Does that mean that we're going to be 100% hitting the target? Absolutely not. But should we have a higher probability of hitting the target? 100%. If you start to learn, how the body moves, understand your assessment. And more importantly, one of the things that was always really hammered into my thought process when it came to selecting exercise and programming was having a justification for every single exercise that I pick. And it's not like that as much anymore. I don't know if it's like that, but I just remember like the people that I interned under, they were always just like, why'd you pick this exercise? Why didn't you pick that version? Why didn't you pick, it was always like that. And so for me, when I write a program, it's like a 4-day program for an entire month, every single exercise. And maybe there's like 80 exercises in there between warm up, plyometrics, with different kinds of warm-ups, plyometrics, strength training, cool down, conditioning, like all these different things. Like if you have an understanding of the body, you can justify every single exercise and you can make variations to every exercise. And no two programs are going to look the same. But I could give everybody a split squat, but it may look different, little tweaks for every single person based on their assessment. And so, again, that's where you start to have a higher probability of success versus somebody who has no right to be under the bar doing a bilateral back squat. You give it to them, you could bury them, you can crush them because they're not in a position or a shape or have the structure or whatever it is to be able to perform that movement. And so you're going to have a lower probability of success if you just give everybody the same thing. But you understand what, like, again, the principles of movement and assessment, exercise selection, be more of a sniper, right? Versus an assault rifle. You know what I mean?
Exactly. You're just spraying.
You're
Hopefully
just
something
spraying.
works.
Hopefully it hits someone. It's like, no. I'm
Yeah.
a sniper from 500 meters away. You know what I mean?
And I love that. I love when you can get it pinpoint accurate. Like we'll have a client come in as, oh, I got this pain that's been going on for such a long time. I tried all of these things, just listing out all these things. In my head was like, he just threw a kitchen sink at you.
Yeah.
All we needed was one exercise to address everything, and then the body instantly just felt very, very much better.
Yes.
And
100%.
it's always cool when it happens, but guess what? It doesn't always happen because
Doesn't always happen.
and there are so many situations in which I would come in and I say, hey, look, we're going to try a couple of different things. We don't know which one's going to work for your body, but this is the general pathway that I want to enter this equation. We try this, we retest. How's that feel? It's a little bit better. Okay, do this, try this. Oh, that's even better. Try this, try that. Oh, that got worse. I'm like, good. So out of all these three, we know this matches closer to what your body needs. And then you start to come back and think, okay, if this works, what else might be a way for us to progress this into something more complicated for the body to, make further improvements. So I want to talk about just your mentorship, the people that you work with, the coaches that you work with. I see on your stories all the time about all these positive impacts that you've had. What are some of the most common thing you hear from your students, like after taking your mentorship or going through a course that you presented
on? That's a great question. What's great is that part of the quiz that I provide, like after you complete the mentorship or the course, is I ask, like, just honestly and anonymously, like, what would you recommend this mentorship or course? Why or why not? And, just explain. And the answers that I get are really cool. But the most common ones that I get is that one of them is confidence. The word confidence is used a lot. They're confident. They're more confident taking on complex cases. The other thing that they commonly say is that they totally change the way they view the body, right? They actually have a system now where even if they take another course, they're not just totally throwing out everything they know in, to try to apply this new system. It's like, no, here is a foundational framework that I can use. And no matter what I learn, whether it's fascial training or neurology or whatever it is, they still have this thing to fall back on. Like, this is the viewpoint of how movement is. And no matter what course or system you take, at the fundamental level, all of them are talking about the exact same thing. They're just using different terms. And so that's what I try to do is teach people to think better. And that's another thing, is they feel like they can think in a different way versus me just giving the answers. And because I don't think that's what a mentor is, right? A mentor is not someone who just gives you answers, but teaches you how to get to those answers. And so, so it's the confidence, it's new ways of thinking, it's understanding. A lot of times people are like, oh, I go on Instagram and I see all these exercises and I can understand why they may use it and when they may use it. So again, understanding the why behind it. And then one of the biggest ones, I think, is the confidence in their assessment process and understanding the assessment, and in turn, getting better exercises. I have a few people who have taken the mentorship who are now the go-to person in their network. I have a trainer in England who works in a facility with a bunch of physios, osteos, and chiros, and he educates them on movement, which is crazy. Again, the whole concept of physical therapists, they are the pinnacle of movement. Trainers, they don't understand movement, they understand training. But it's like understanding that it's not understanding how movement works or how movement occurs and the principles behind it is not limited to any professional. It is universal. How you apply it, that becomes the difference, right? Based on the laws, based on whatever, like your scope, but the knowledge is not limited. And so I think it's just opened the door to a lot of these people to think of training in a different way, how to, I said I don't like the word regress, but how to progress and regress exercises through categorizing exercises based on center of gravity or center of mass or different phases of gait. So I think if you take one of my courses or join us at the workshop, that's one of the biggest things that I'm going to do is teach you a different way to think about the body and how it moves so that you can become more specific with your exercise selection and actually have an assessment model that tells you what exercises you should be using. Like I always give this analogy in the mentorship that I like to think of, the Willy Wonka scene where it's got all the kids that come into the chocolate factory and he says, look at this machine that can create all these different candies. So put all the different flavors you want, and then it's going to come out of the machine, this mixture of a candy. Those buttons, those different flavors are your assessment. And the candy that comes out, that's the specific exercise that you're going to pick based on all that information you've received. So that's the way that I think about exercise, is that we're using this X-ray vision assessment to then pick the exercise. So if you take my courses, like that's essentially what I'm going to be presenting, is how to build a machine that allows you to select the most appropriate exercises by understanding the principles of exercises and movement.
I mean, I think even as a physical therapist, you say physical therapy understands movement and then trainers understand training. I don't really think that is really the case because having gone through physical therapy school, there's actually very little education on exercise. And the stuff that we learn is going to be your classic like clamshell exercises, the banded external rotation exercises, nothing further than that. So is basic and even I think even more basic than basic, because if you have done any kind of traditional personal training certification, you would at least learn how to hinge, you will learn how to do a squat or a lunge. But we do not get that type of education, which is amazing. I think what it is because physical therapy is such a broad scope. Like we're in hospitals, we're in wound care, we're in neuro rehab. So I think they really had to fit all of those things into a program where I think really the exercise part have taken a back seat, unfortunately. And you have a lot of therapists out there who, quite frankly, have never been inside a gym, and they're teaching exercises for people that need to be active and going back to just sports and working out. And that simply just wouldn't work.
Yeah. And you know what's really cool about the mentorship that I've run is I always say that my favorite part about it is meeting people from all over the world from every single profession. Like I've had dentists, I've had physiotherapists, massage therapists, Pilates instructors, yoga. I've had osteopaths. I've had all these different professions, even like podiatrist, myofascial, myofascial, but also biotherapist. Like every single different profession there is has taken, even ones that aren't in the fitness or the rehabilitation industry, understand movement. But the coolest thing is that everybody's coming in and we're really building a community where it's like nobody has this type of ego because they're a certain title or whatever it is. It's like everybody's there for the same purpose, trying to learn the same thing. And that's the cool thing. Again, it's the accessibility now of information that wasn't there when I was coming up in the industry. I had to fly to Europe to take a course if I wanted to take something, or the US, or because first of all, there wasn't anything coming to Canada. No one came to Canada. So I had to go everywhere else. But the thing is now it's so accessible from people all over the world. And as you said, it's pretty alarming some of the people who don't understand basic movement, whether that's how to execute a hinge or exercise selection, but like just concepts. So regardless of the profession, it's pretty crazy. But the thing that I'm trying to do is create a better standard, right? I actually have gyms who are taking my foundations course and are saying every single new trainer or every single new therapist has to take this course before they start, just so everybody starts on an even playing field with some degree of understanding of movement. And like, I think that's the cool thing is you have people all over the world who are super motivated to just be better, to get better, and to understand movement in a way that you don't learn in school. Because the fact is even me, I went to school, undergrad and masters, and I barely learned anything about movement. It's crazy. It was just like,
Not in the practical sense, I think, more in the
yeah,
theoretical sense.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's theoretical stuff, but the physiology of the body, anatomy, and stuff like that. But again, the anatomy was cadaver based anatomy. It wasn't, if you put your hands on the ground, what does the bicep do? It's like, no, it doesn't do that. Right. But it's more so, and I've got that feedback a lot from physical therapy students or physical therapists as well. That's like, yeah, it's based on cadaver. We understand how to apply these specific manual techniques. That's great. But what's funny is I feel like I'm good enough at understanding movement that I actually tell manual therapists the type of techniques to use or the type of muscles to release based on how I'm programming an exercise for somebody. I'm working with a professional hockey player, and I have a manual therapist in his town where he lives, and I'm programming and I'm on the phone with him saying like, hey, we need to go after these tissues, we need to go after these structures. So it's like you understand the body so well that you're not limited to understanding that, hey, when someone does something manually, or they say, hey, this is not moving very well. I know the exercises that I need to adjust or include to be able to make sure both of those are in sync and lining up with each other. So, yeah, I think to me, the coolest thing is seeing everyone from around the world, and everyone just wants to get better. And I love that.
No ego. I
No
tell
ego.
people all the time, I'm a physical therapist, but some of the people that I really respect and learn the most from are not physical therapists.
Mhm.
Some person I learned from, his name is Gary Ward. He's the one behind Anatomy Motion. It's
Yeah.
with all the wedges and all the stuff that you
Yeah.
see us do. I learned from him, and he was a ski boot fitter. Like
Yeah.
that was his trade, and that's how he went into his rabbit hole of understanding closed chain mechanics, which
Mhm.
is, for those who may not understand these terms, it just means whatever happens to the physics of the body once the limb is touching a surface. That's
Mhm.
closed chain, and
Mhm.
that's actually very interesting because in physical therapy school, I think we learn everything in an open chain manner.
Yeah. Yeah.
But real life predominantly happens in a closed chain manner.
Yeah. And you know what? I feel like personally, the best people are the ones where you don't know what their title is, right? It's like, I didn't know that about Gary Ward. Had no idea. Like, but I didn't know if he was a physical therapist or a doctor or what, or a podiatrist but again, you're not limited to your title. Like, again, the application of things is like, people who are trainers shouldn't be doing manual therapy, although in some countries you're allowed to do that. But in North America, at least, you're not allowed to do that. But again, I don't do manual stuff, but I should be able to understand why you're doing something as a manual therapist and how that applies to what I'm seeing from an assessment standpoint in programming. Right. But I find like the best people are the ones that, I mean, trying to say this in a good way, but like the best ones are the ones you don't understand their title and they don't need to use their title, if that makes sense.
I think they don't have the boundaries of the title, and they're
Yes.
free to explore their most creative
Yeah.
heightened senses versus
Yeah.
bogged down by, hey, I have to think within this confines of my profession
Yes.
versus, hey, anything goes. I
Yeah.
think
You're a
some of
physical
the,
therapist.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd
You're a
say
physical
some of, oh,
therapist.
sorry, I'm
Sorry.
gonna
No, you
let
go.
you
You
go. I'm
go.
gonna let you go. I think people have something to say.
No, I was just going to say that, you as a physical therapist get the golden, you have the ticket. Like you got your ticket. Now you can do whatever you want. Again, I mean, you're not really limited that much. I mean, you could do manual stuff, you could do training stuff, right? So like you've got the ticket to explore whatever you want to explore. And yeah, now you don't have any like constraints. And so it doesn't matter what, like you can train people. Like you can be a train. I know so many so many physical therapists that are trainers in professional sports because like they understand both. They understand how to manipulate the body through manual standpoint, but also through physical and constraint based approaches, right?
I have a friend. He's my roommate back in grad school. He had a physical therapy degree. Guess what he's doing now? He's a breath coach.
Yeah,
He teaches
exactly.
people how to breathe, and that is
Yeah,
all he does. He
that's it.
connects the emotional and the neural with the breath and the physical.
Yeah,
And I'm like, cool. How cool is that? Like,
that's
who knew that?
amazing.
Who knew that's what you could do with this profession?
That's it. Like I feel like the door is starting to open a little bit and for people to understand like there's a couple people I think there's like yeah, there's a couple people coming to the Boston workshop that aren't practitioners. They just want to understand the body more. They just want to learn how the body moves. They want to understand why people train a certain way, like, or they're interested in getting into it and they think that, hey, maybe it's better to learn this kind of way of thinking versus thinking that a textbook to get my certification, that's all the knowledge I need to know. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're
Mhm.
like, yeah, I'm in the process of getting my certification, but that's not going to teach me a lot. Certification is not going to teach me. They're going to give me the required baseline knowledge that they believe is important. But let me actually learn how the body moves. Let me actually learn how to apply exercises so that I can be better. And yeah, I mean, I just think that if people go into this industry being like, this is my profession, this is my title, I'm going to be constrained to this, I just don't feel like they're going to get as good of results as the people who have opened up their mind to learning different things. So they have so many different ways of thinking or processes to draw from to apply to the person in front of you. If you think in one system, then you are going to apply that one system to everybody. You're not going to have a high probability of success because there are going to be people who defy that system. But if you, like I said, if you bring everything back to fundamental principles, everyone is saying the same thing in a different way using different terminology. You understand those things and you can apply those. You can draw from any system and get any type of exercise, and you're gonna have a higher success rate, I think.
Yeah, so I think we're super excited for you to come through Boston. September 27th, September 28th. We're gonna be going for a full day with a little bit of break in between for lunch. Now, just want to reflect on the stuff that we be talking about. I know you mentioned that a few, but we'll just list them a little bit. So you be going through a thorough assessment process that you use,
Mhm.
exercise selection. I think you're also going to be diving into um, something along the realm of plyometrics,
Mhm.
right? And is there
Yep.
something other stuff that we're missing here?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about a different perspective on how to view just like movement, like the upper body and lower body, how to assess the lower body, looking at the feet, understanding what the feet are telling you about what's going on above. Just like you mentioned, kind of like that coupling of joints. Like, what is the big toe doing? What does that mean about the knee? What does that mean about the hip, et cetera? And start to look at the assessment of the lower body and the upper body, and then start to identify compensations based on that, and then talk a lot about exercise selection from constraint-based approach. Like, what does it mean when I hold a weight a certain way? What does it mean when I put a ramp on my foot a certain way? What if I just elevate my heel instead of putting my full foot on a ramp? Understanding different elements of force, like I said, like teaching people how to accept force or distribute force, how to produce force, how to do that repeatedly. What does that mean? And how does that mean based on certain people's shapes? Like, you got wider pelvis versus narrow rib cage, or you got a wide rib cage versus narrow pelvis, or you just are like cylindrical. Like, what do all those mean in terms of how you manage pressure? And so putting that all together, talk about program design based on the mechanics of the body. So it's going to be very all encompassing. It's not just looking at the lower body, it's going to be looking at both, putting together this whole model of how to view the body, how to assess it, and then how to program it based on all these different things that you can consider when developing a program.
Mm. Right. So essentially, if you work with movement, then this is the course for you.
100%. 100%. If you've taken Evolve, or you've taken the foundations course, or you just want to understand the why behind assessment, and that's what I do every week. I put an assessment video on Instagram, and I always ask, like, what do you see? And the intention of it is to get people to think in a different way about what they see. And you'll see there's hundreds of different answers. And so that just goes to show that something like a squat is quite a complex movement to view. But understanding how to assess more clearly, having more of a process with assessment, understanding how that applies to picking the right exercise. So if you're in movement, if you've taken any of my courses, if you work in pain, if you're a trainer, whatever profession it is, you're going to benefit from this, because it's just going to be a principle-based understanding of how the body moves to give you a higher success rate for results.
Excellent. We love it. And we can't wait to have you here in a month or so.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.